rustic. I discovered a luxury equivalent with lake views. I also designed the Save the Date website. They used my Canva account. I still had the login. But now I was a burden since Mia's father disliked the energy I provided. I wore black to breakfast. Because I asked where the $3,000 catering money went and didn't give up when Mom answered, "Just trust us." They always needed me, until they didn't. They were now arranging their picture-perfect family tableau without me. Curated smiles. Filtered bliss. No, Jack. Just the people who matter. I took a big breath and opened our shared folder. Mia and Zach wedding planning. I browsed through the images, contracts, and vendor schedules. Then I deleted every file I had posted. All 63 of them. The folder was renamed, "Good Luck Without Me." I did not tell anyone. I did not warn them. Allow them to find out in the morning when they try to confirm the florist. Allow them to scramble while the photographer isn't present. Let them wonder what happened when the venue sent them an email saying, "Unfortunately, this reservation has been canceled by the account holder." They assumed I'd remain silent. Smile. Swallow it like you always do. But this was not about the wedding. This was the last fracture in something that had been sitting for years. They handed me the scissors, expecting me not to cut the rope. They wanted me gone. Wish granted. They didn't realize I'd take everything with me when I went. And I was only getting started. If you ask them, I was always the dramatic type. The person who overreacted. Who overthinks things. But let me explain how I became that guy. Let's go back to 6 months ago. It was Friday night. Mia called me in tears. Zach had been laid off. The apartment they rented downtown was 3 months late. They attempted to negotiate with the landlord, but he demanded the money. All of it. Or he would file eviction proceedings on Monday. I did not even hesitate. I transferred $3,800 from my savings account and instructed her to call me if she needed anything extra. That was the third time that year I'd helped them out. The first occurred when Dad unintentionally overdrew from his retirement account and required $5,000 to avoid fines. The second occurred when Mom forgot that Mia's bachelorette Airbnb was on my credit card and allowed the girls to wreck the place. I maintained spreadsheets. I saved screenshots. Not because I intended to use them, but because I needed to convince myself that I wasn't crazy. That I hadn't anticipated the steady bleed of money, time, and energy into a family who treated me as if I were a silent giver. But it wasn't just about money. It was how I was regarded after I assisted. As a servant, a backstage hand. While I was fixing his gutters in the middle of a thunderstorm, Dad joked that I should work as a house husband, because I definitely wasn't man enough to be the breadwinner. Everyone laughed, even Mia. When I brought it up later, my mother said I was being overly sensitive. He said he was just old school. Old school? In high school, that man locked me out of the house because I had come home wearing eyeliner. But okay. Maybe I was overly sensitive. Mia told me about her engagement over FaceTime, while Mom and Dad were seated behind her on the couch cheering. They had helped her prepare the proposal with Zach. We even went ring shopping with him. Me? I discovered out via a screen. I should have spotted the pattern. But a part of me remained hopeful that if I helped enough, they'd finally treat me like I mattered. I paid $600 for the engagement shoot, developed the wedding website. I made unique invitations. I paid a deposit for the venue because Mom's card was acting weird. I was building their fantasy brick by brick, while they gave me leftovers and called me a good sport. And then the texting began. Aunt Megan initially said, "Hey, I heard you're not invited to the ceremony. Is that true?" Uncle Jeff then said, "Did you say anything to Zach's dad?" Just curious. Finally, the Facebook post that broke my heart. A photo of Mia and Zach with my parents standing in front of a rustic barn filled with fairy lights. The caption read, "So proud of our family. Can't wait for the big day with all the right people by our side." I was not even tagged. I browsed through the comments. One of Mia's friends inquired, "Is Jack going to be there?" He was always so funny. Mia responded, "We're keeping things small. Just people we trust." That night, I did not sleep. I read through every receipt, every communication, and every time they labeled me selfish for requesting a refund. And I understood something. I was the only person in this family who gave without expecting anything in return, And I was the only one who did not receive anything in return. A few days afterwards, I received a group text. Hi family. Can everyone pitch in for Mia's bridal shower decorations? Jack, since you're so good with websites, can you make a landing page for RSVPs? Hugs and kisses. I didn't respond. 10 minutes later, Mia messaged me directly, asking, can you just do this one thing without being passive-aggressive? So I did something different. I got into the wedding venue's account and sought a refund for the $2,500 deposit. It was legally non-refundable, but I had purchased wedding insurance during the booking process just in case. No one spotted the small checkbox. They repaid me 90% after I made a family conflict claim. Then I went into Canva and erased all of my designs, including RSVPs, table assignments, and welcome signs. I made a new file called Ask Zach's Dad to Fix This, which I shared with the entire family. That's when everything started to go wrong. 3 hours later, Mom called distraught. What are you doing? Do you know how this looks? I responded, I do. That's why I'm doing it. Then Dad called. He skipped right to ranting. You've always been jealous of Mia. That's what this is. You couldn't stand her having a better life than you. I hung up while holding the phone away from my ear. That night, my phone exploded. Mia wrote in her Instagram story, betrayal always comes from those closest to you. Mom then shared a photo of Mia crying with the remark, nothing hurts more than your own brother trying to ruin your special day. People began messaging me, friends and cousins. Some texted, are you okay? Most people did not ask. They just responded, why would you ruin her wedding? I did not respond to any of them. Then I received the package, a yellow envelope with no return address. Inside is a printed screenshot, an inside messaging thread from Mia's bridesmaid group chat. She couldn't stop laughing. We'll get Jack to pay for the cake too. Just guilt him about being the only brother. Works every time. A different message followed. Zach doesn't even like him. He said Jack gives him the creeps. LOL. One more thing. He won't be at the wedding. I'll make sure of it. Watch. There was a sticky note on top with the handwriting I recognized. You deserve better. K. I wasn't sure who K was, but I'd find out. And when I did, everything changed. K had more than screenshots. K had audio. And the moment I heard it, I knew precisely what I was going to do for Mia's rehearsal dinner. The rehearsal dinner was held at a posh winery 30 minutes outside of town. They termed it rustic luxury. I dubbed it a marketing ploy with pricey wine and fairy lights affixed to the trees. But I did show up. Dressed neatly, calm, focused, because I did not come to eat. I came to bury the circus. I walked in just as they were toasting. Mia was in the middle of laughing. Zach had his arm around her. Dad appeared uncomfortable. Mom avoided my gaze. They clearly did not expect me to show up. I intended to play the villain in their script. The spiteful sibling who damaged everything and refused to let go. But I was not bitter. I was finished. I stepped directly to the front of the room. Sorry to interrupt, I murmured, tapping a glass. Conversations froze. Someone laughed awkwardly. Mia frowned. I removed a little speaker from my jacket and set it on the table. I then held up a flash disk. Zach stood up. What are you doing? I looked at him. Giving you exactly what you deserve. I hit play. The speaker is on. Turn the volume up. A girl's voice. Mia was chuckling. We'll get Jack to pay for the cake too. Just guilt him about being the only brother. Works every time. The quiet broke. Mouths opened. Someone gave a gasp. The fork clattered. I did not flinch. Another voice. A different note. Zach doesn't even like him. He said Jack gives him the creeps. Lol. Zach became white. Mia lunged at the speaker. I stepped in front of it. Sit down. It was not a request. Then came the last clip. Mia says quietly and smugly, he won't be at the wedding. I'll make sure of it. Watch. I pressed pause and looked around the room. Any questions? Zach opened his mouth and then closed it again. My father stood up, infuriated. You think this is appropriate? You think this? Sit down, I snapped. For the first time in my life he did. I turned to Mia. I spent over $11,000 on this wedding. I designed your website, negotiated your venue, and paid your florist. I did it because I thought, stupidly, that this was family. Mia was shaking. Her mascara streaked down one cheek. You don't understand it. No, I replied. You don't. You never did. You didn't want a brother. You wanted a wallet. Then I pulled out the folder, which contained hard copies, screenshots, and all of her, mom and dad's texts. The PayPal receipts, the invoices I paid, and the ones I preserved when others forgot. The group conversation where Mia introduced me as the family's free wedding planner. I gave them to Zach. You still want to marry her? I inquired. He stared at the pages. No response. A woman in a gray coat stood up from the back. She carried a badge around her neck and a phone in her palm. Hello everyone, sorry for intruding, she remarked. I'm Kristen. Jack and I used to work together. I also run a digital forensic agency. Jack asked me to verify some files. She gazed at Mia. And to confirm they weren't deep fakes. She held up her phone. This audio? It's 100% authentic. No edits, no splices. Pulled from a WhatsApp backup linked to your old number. Don't worry, I have the metadata too. Mia's mouth dropped open. Mom gave a gasp. Is this a joke? Dad demanded. Kristen smiled. Not even a little. Then came the twist. Zach turned to face Mia. You told me Jack said those things to you. That he threatened you. That he was unstable. He brought up the printouts. You lied. She reaches for his arm. No, Zach, don't touch me. Then the room exploded. My aunt stood up and began ranting. Someone knocked over the glass. My mother attempted to say something but choked. And through it all, I stood there, silent and serene, watching it burn. When the commotion reached its peak, I lifted my voice one final time. I'm not coming to the wedding. You already made that decision. But now, you can do it without my money, my help, or my silence. I turned to my parents. You cut me out the moment you realized I wouldn't play the puppet anymore, so I'm cutting the strings too. Then, as I turned to go, Zach spoke. I'm calling it off, he said, loud, clear. Mia screamed, a harsh, sharp sound that pierced the air like glass. You can't do this here. Oh, I replied, he just did. Then I walked out. No dramatic music, there's no slow motion, just the sound of everything they'd built falling behind me. I did not drive home following the rehearsal dinner. I didn't even get onto the freeway. Instead, I drove a side road north that was quiet and had no reception. A month before, I had signed a lease on a small home in a neglected region of the state. The population is 600. A single diner. One gas station. Nobody cared who I was. That is precisely why I chose it. I paid for 6 months in advance. No forwarding address. There are no digital breadcrumbs. Just silent. For the first 3 days I did not switch on my phone. I didn't check my emails. I did not speak to anyone. I sat on the porch with a thermos of black coffee, listening to birds squabble for territory they'd never claim. I did not feel triumphant. I felt free. My neck no longer feels tense. No more guilt. No one approached me for money. Nobody pretended to love me just long enough to get a transfer. On day 4, I went into town and enrolled in an archival preservation course at the local college, which I had previously been too humiliated to pursue. History. Dusty newspapers. Letters were forgotten. Finally, I was surrounded by records that were preserved accurately. There was no performance here. There was no manipulation. No. You owe us. I volunteered at the county museum. Helped to catalog images from the 1950s. Repaired an antique microfilm machine. And for once, I didn't care if no one noticed. It was mine. Quietly mine. About a week later, the messages began to arrive in my old Gmail inbox, which was tied to my emergency phone. I didn't read the first couple, but the subject line was clear enough. Can we just talk? You went too far. We're still family. Next followed the blocked calls, dozens. I left the phone turned off. They were not attempting to make peace. They tried to reset the game. What terrified them was not the evidence. It was the silence. They couldn't take not knowing what I'd do next, because for the first time, they weren't in control. 3 weeks later, A court notification was delivered to my old flat. Apparently my father had attempted to sell a section of the family land. What he didn't comprehend was that I had locked the deed 2 years ago when he unintentionally tried to remortgage it without my permission. I had left it in legal limbo, waiting. He activated the provision himself. As a result, his business transaction fell through. His buyer walked away, prompting a fraud inquiry. Not because I caused it, but because I did not stop it. I did not publish a blog. I did not post a spectacular expose. I didn't send screenshots to the group chat. I just disappeared. There were no birthday calls. There is no financial rescue. No maybe next time. That is what truly ruined them. Because narcissists do not fear the repercussions. They are afraid of being irrelevant. They are afraid of being on stage without an audience. One morning I walked to the post office. Not for mail, but for a tiny item that I had ordered. Someone behind me in line was talking on the phone. Put it this way. I heard Mia's fiancé walked out before the wedding even happened. Then apparently her brother disappeared. Took all his money with him. I did not turn around. I never gave a statement. Never clarified anything. I simply became inaccessible. No address, no number, no access. They believed that quiet indicated weakness. They had no idea it was an option. A silent surgical type of goodbye. Not in words, but in their absence. The kind of absence that cannot be altered. The kind that makes people sit with the consequences of what they did. They can't make me feel guilty anymore. They are unable to contact when the rent is late, or the credit card is maxed. They can't pretend everything is fine when they need another favor. Because there is no longer a we. There is only them, and a mailbox that reads, "No messages received." Do you know what's funny? When you ultimately walk away from the people who have constructed their life on top of you, they do not tumble instantly. They merely stood there shocked, as if someone had turned off the sound and they couldn't find the volume button. That is what happened. Even after everything had burned down, after the rehearsal, after the calls, after the silence, they remained hopeful that I would return. Because I always have. But this time I didn't. I changed my phone number. Not just a SIM card replacement, new carrier, new country code. No forwarding. There's no auto reply. Just nothing. I closed the joint account that Dad had set up with me for emergencies. I moved my bank statements to a private digital vault. I updated my medical power of attorney. I removed all family names. I even updated the emergency contact information on my driver's license from mom to nobody. They do not know where I live. They do not know where I work. They're not sure if I'm in the state, the country, or even above ground. And this kills them. I returned a month ago, but only once. Not to the house. Not to the vineyard. I drove by the wedding venue, which I had canceled. It was vacant. Abandoned. A for sale sign hung crookedly on the front gate. A faded bouquet lay crushed on the stones. It felt right. I rolled down the windows. The breeze smelt of rain and melancholy. Before leaving, I did one thing. I strolled to the mailbox at the main entrance and dropped off a little envelope. There's no return address. Inside is a printout of the last wedding invoice I paid, with a post-it note on top. It said, "Thanks for nothing." I have stopped checking the old email. But every now and then, I log in to observe the flood. One unopened message was labeled, "Please just talk to us." I did not open it. Another one. "We don't know who you are anymore." That one made me smile. Because finally they're correct. I am not the person that paid their debts at 3 a.m. I am not the emergency contact. I am not the wedding planner, free therapist, unseen sibling, or guilt-ridden son. I'm just a guy living a different life now. One that they cannot reach, corrupt, or rewrite. I received a new mailbox last week. Metal, clean, lockable. One of those security drop boxes that won't let anything out once it's inside. The technician asked what name I wanted inscribed on the plate. I replied, "No name, just a message." So now on a small metal rectangle immediately beneath the keyhole it says, "This box does not accept apologies." And what about the stillness I'm hearing every day now? Peace. Thanks for watching and being part of the drama. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a wild news story. Family laughed at my business over dinner. I let them talk. Then I built an empire. When I shut the door, they begged me to come back. My whole family laughed at me at dinner. So I invited them all back to my mansion. What I told them at the end left the room in total silence. During Thanksgiving dinner, my family made fun of my small business. "How's that going? Still broke yet?" They let out a big laugh. I said nothing. They discovered that I was yesterday. Even now, occasionally, I can still hear the laughter in my ears. There was more than simply laughter. It seemed nasty, piercing, and sharp, the kind that permeates a space. Last Thanksgiving, that is. With a turkey in the middle, candles flickering softly, and the sound of football resonating from the living room, the table was crowded. It ought to have been comfortable, it ought to have been familiar. Rather, it was like being in a harsh, chilly spotlight. When my cousin Jenna snorted so loudly that she nearly knocked over her wine glass, I was halfway through telling Uncle Brian about my business, which I put every hour, every cent, and every part of myself into. She snarled, adding further venom to the phrase as if it were a sickness. "How's your little business going? Still broke yet?" another person asked. I didn't even look to see who it was. It was followed by thunderous laughter. My dad muttered a little laugh. In that pitying, disappointing manner, my mother shook her head. I said nothing. I gave them a tiny, fragile smile and let them enjoy themselves. But something changed inside. The goal was not to disprove them. I wanted to prove myself correct. For them, I was not going to succeed. In spite of them, I was going to succeed. I recall trying to ignore the knot in my gut as I stood in the kitchen after supper, scraping leftovers into a plastic container. From the living room came the sounds of football and laughter. My brother James was making a lot of noise about how I probably sold 3 t-shirts in a year. When he said, maybe next year he'll afford real mashed potatoes, everyone laughed so hard that someone gave up. I lowered my head. However, an odd event occurred. I assume no one could hear my father, my aunt, and a few other people conversing in the den through the partially closed door as I went to put the dishes away. I heard it at that point. Aunt Linda murmured, "Poor kid," with a tone of phony worry. "Still chasing rainbows?" Dad gave a grunt. If he had any sense, he'd quit that fantasy and get a real job. Wendy's is always hiring. They all laughed. By the time he's 30, he'll still be living in some drab apartment dreaming about his big break. "It's almost sad," said another voice, possibly that of my uncle. The words that hurt the most were then spoken by my mother, who is a kind and loving person. "Well, at least he's harmless. I mean, it's not like he'll ever actually succeed enough to embarrass us." With my hands shaking around a plate I hadn't even known I was holding, I remained motionless. They weren't merely skeptical of me. They thought I would fail. They needed me to fail, which is worse. They would be safer if I remained the underdog, the idealist who never achieved anything. I ventured to think I could create something better, but it was simpler than acknowledging they had chosen a life of mediocrity and resentment. Without saying goodbye, I took my jacket from the peg by the door, put the dish carefully in the sink, and left the kitchen. I hardly noticed the cold air biting my face outside. I had just one idea racing through my head. Never again. I would never again ask for their blessing. I would never again justify myself to those who were hoping for my downfall. I opened my laptop that evening and spent a considerable amount of time staring at the screen while I sat by myself in my small, drafty flat. I could either fall under their incredulity or use it to shape me into something unstoppable. I went into my business plan, made all the necessary changes, tightened it up, and plotted out every crazy, unachievable goal I could think of. After that, I started working. And I continued. After Thanksgiving, the first 6 months were terrible. I worked out of a small 1-bedroom apartment with plumbing that shook like a dying engine and barely functional heat. My hands were cramped from typing, packing, and hustle, and my eyes burned from too many hours of staring at a screen. I usually woke up before daylight and fell asleep after midnight. I didn't have an impressive startup tale. Angel investors weren't present. No loans from relatives. Just me, a used printer, a laptop that was half broken, and a heart full of obstinate blazing defiance. There were mornings when I would sit at the small kitchen table, surrounded by empty coffee cups and bills, and wonder what on earth I was doing. I would distrust myself more than I would be insulted by my family. Maybe they were right. Maybe you are just chasing rainbows. Maybe you are just nothing. Then I would hear my mom's voice again. At least he's harmless. I mean, it's not like he'll ever actually succeed enough to embarrass us. And that would rekindle the fire beneath me. In the least spectacular way imaginable, the pivotal moment occurred. A random online order I packed one night while dozing off, a customer I had all but forgotten about, and a social media tag for my little business. A picture, a post, and a few complimentary remarks regarding the caliber of my work. There was nothing viral about it. Not a million likes. No quick stardom. However, when I woke up the following day, I had 12 new orders, which is more than I typically receive in a week. 24 then. Then 60. I had to hurry, get more supplies, work more quickly, and update my website. However, the impetus was genuine and palpable for the first time. It also brought new people. Actual persons. Not relatives. Not doubters. Individuals who supported my ideas, believed in what I was creating, and wrote notes that said, "You're doing something special. Keep going." It's done me, honestly. How strangers could be kinder than everyone in my family. And among all of the orders, shipments, late nights, and unrelenting labor, I came to the following realization. Blood is not family. Family is loyalty. Respect is family. Family is unconditional affection that isn't conditioned or judged. Brick by heavy brick, piece by piece, the weight I'd carried my entire life, the urgent desire for their approval, began to crumble. And I could see the path ahead clearly for the first time. It would take a long time. It would be solitary. However, I was going to have it. It took place on a soggy Tuesday. Life-altering events seldom wait for ideal weather, which is funny. I received an email as I was bent over a pile of packaging orders at my kitchen table. Initially, I nearly erased it. Opportunity, the subject line, sounded like just another spam message. However, I opened it for some reason. It came from Caroline Walters, a boutique owner who I had never heard of but who seemed to have a sizable fan base in the independent sector. She wanted to discuss a cooperation after discovering one of my goods through that small customer post months ago. A large one. Supplying her nationwide chain of businesses. I read her words repeatedly as if they were written in a different language while I sat there blinking at the computer. She thought the branding was fantastic. She thought the quality was fantastic. She thought the story was fantastic. Additionally, if I could quickly scale up, she wanted to highlight my whole product line. I didn't think twice. I responded in 5 minutes, possibly coming out as impatient yet unconcerned. Later that afternoon, she called me, and her voice was enthusiastic, professional, and kind. She inquired about the size of my procedure. I told the truth. For now, I informed her, it was just me. She chuckled. My family's chuckle is one of happiness and admiration rather than one of derision. Her words, "That's even better. People love authenticity." I had a draft contract in my inbox by the time the call ended. I had contacted a small fulfillment company before the end of the week to assist me with production management. My business, which they ridiculed, was closing a deal by the end of the month that would put 6 figures in my pocket before spring. It seemed unreal. I realized my life was changing as I stood in that same small kitchen, the cheap linoleum floor sticky under my bare feet, the rain beating down on the window. I ought to have been overjoyed. However, all I experienced was this peculiar, silent calm. The air wasn't punched by me. I refrained from screaming into the night. I simply grinned slowly and wearily and muttered to the empty room, "You were wrong about me." They were wrong. Every single one of them. The following year flew by, filled with new contracts, restless nights, and hard-won development. I was no longer merely getting by. I was doing well. The small company they made fun of grew into a real one with staff, investors, and actual momentum. I just sat there and gazed at the screen for a long time the first time I wired 6 digits into my savings account. Not because I found it hard to believe. No, I anticipated this. Because I secretly knew that I didn't feel the way I had anticipated. I felt no vindication. I didn't feel victorious. I simply felt liberated. That's when I had the notion. I had no desire for vengeance. I desired resolution. I had no intention of showing up at their home with a bank statement in front of them. It would be too simple. It's too loud. I looked too much like the child they believed me to be. I chose to let them come to me instead. First, I purchased a huge house. I mean, a mansion. Situated on a hill, the expansive windows captured each sunset. Marble floors that reverberated as you moved. And enough space to lose yourself in. I told myself this each time I passed across those enormous, deserted hallways. You built this. No one can take it away. My cousins used to make jokes about my never being able to afford anything more than a second-hand Honda, so I filled the garage with that kind of vehicle. A Maserati in deep black. A Jeep that has been customized. A vintage Mustang, simply because I could. I didn't make any online posts about it. Avoid taking selfies in front of fast autos. No toasts with champagne. I said nothing. Then I sent out a group text 2 months ago. Easy. Straightforward. Family gathering. Sunday. Big news to share. The invitation was accepted by everyone. Naturally, they didn't. Deep down, they still considered me to be the loser they could comfortably feel sorry for, despite the fact that curiosity is a strong narcotic. They had no idea that their jaws would drop to the ground before they had even rung the doorbell when they pulled up that twisting road. They were unaware that they were not the subject of the major news. It was all about me and the new life I had created in their absence. On the day of the event, the air was clear and the sky was so clear that it appeared to have been painted. Even though I got up early, I wasn't at all anxious. I walked about the home in silence during the morning, straightening a painting here, adjusting a vase there. Little pointless activities to kill time. The Maserati shone in the driveway like a black mirror in the sunlight. Beside it, the Jeep and Mustang stood with pride. By midday, my hired caterers were preparing a lavish buffet in the garden, complete with silver cutlery, white tablecloths, and buckets of chilled champagne. I didn't do anything. I just waited. The first vehicle arrived at precisely 1 o'clock. Jenna, my cousin, was there. I saw the mansion as soon as she got out of her dirty minivan while sporting her go-to fake fancy sunglasses. The hesitancy. She gave her husband a brief, piercing look as though to inquire, "Are we at the right place?" A second vehicle pulled up. Then another, and yet another. Their expressions were a mixture of bewilderment and incredulity as they spilled out into the driveway one by one. I couldn't hear Uncle Brian muttering something. In an attempt to appear disinterested, my brother James hummed softly to himself. My mother, who always wore a look of bored superiority at family gatherings, was motionless on the front steps, holding her purse tightly like a shield. For a long, beautiful moment, no one spoke. Then Jenna burst out laughing, too loud and brittle. She exclaimed, "Oh wow," as she adjusted her shades. "You, renting this place or something?" I gave a charming smile. "Not renting, bought it last month." She opened her mouth, then closed it. "You're kidding," another person remarked, half laughing, half panicking. They had never been unsteady before. They weren't accustomed to me being in control. The marble floors shone like water beneath the chandeliers, and I pointed to the open doors. "Come in. Make yourselves comfortable." Like visitors to a large museum, they cautiously made their way inside, avoiding contact with anything. As they moved through the spacious living room, the open kitchen, and the glass walls that looked out onto the well-kept backyard, I observed them from behind. They were rushing to change their stories, and I could see it in their expressions. The desperate search for an explanation that would allow them to maintain their sense of superiority. Their faces were plastered with fake smiles. "Wow," exclaimed my aunt. "This is, really nice. Good for you." Uncle Brian added, "Yeah," giving me a too firm pat on the back. "We always knew you had potential." I simply nodded. Let them speak. Allow them to tangle into knots. I no longer required their approval, never again. I wasn't here to make an impression. I came to bid you farewell. The catering staff presented small works of art, known as hors d'oeuvres, on silver trays. Bites of smoked salmon. Little Wellingtons made with beef. Tiny tartlets that appeared too good to devour. My family walked around seeming like they were at ease. A bit too loudly laughing. Praising the furnishings, the vista, and the tasteful design. It was simple to see beneath the surface though, as their eyes darted around, attempting to solve the problem they were unable to solve. How? When? Did you win the lottery? Was his claim of struggle a lie? They desperately wanted this to be untrue because if it were, it would mean that all of their assumptions about me and themselves were incorrect. Always the most audacious, James drew me away from the champagne table. "So seriously," he replied with a grin. "How do you swing all this? Who's paying you, or is it some kind of like crypto thing?" I gave a faint smile. "I built it," was all I said. He blinked. "Built what?" "My company. My brand. Everything." He gazed at me as if I were speaking a foreign tongue. "Constructed, not talented, not bumped into, constructed." James laughed, this weak trembling thing that didn't quite reach his eyes, and stroked my shoulder like if I were a child. "Man, that's wild. Good for you. Really proud of you, bro." He wasn't, not for a moment. My mother looked at me from the opposite side of the room. She smiled at me, the tense, strained smile she used to wear to church when she pretended everything was just right. I gave a courteous nod. Today there would be no yelling. Don't argue, no charges. Just a single, tidy cut. I looked at my watch. It's almost time. I strolled to the middle of the room, where the marble floors were bathed in golden light from the chandeliers, And I raised a glass, not for a celebratory toast but for closure. The room instantly fell silent. Every discussion ended in the middle of a phrase. All of them looked at me expectantly and eagerly. I finally got their undivided attention after all this time. I let the silence to linger a bit too long while I held the glass loosely in my palm. I felt the pressure of their gazes on me, but I wasn't bothered by it for once. I was in charge of the room for once. I casually cleared my throat. I said, first of all, in a cool, collected tone, thank you all for coming. A couple of courteous nods. Uncomfortable foot shuffles. I'm sure you're wondering why I invited you here today, I said. And the truth is, it's not to brag. It's not to show off. With a gentle clink that sounded almost like a bell toll, I placed my glass down on an adjacent table. I brought you here because I owe you something. They became alert, feeling something. Perhaps they believed that I was going to give them a share of the pie. Perhaps they believed that I was going to tell those who had always supported me about my accomplishment. I allowed that dream to linger for a single, cruel heartbeat. Then I gave a chilly, final smile. When I said, I owe you a thank you. Because without you, none of this would exist. Whispers? Smiles of confusion. My voice was as steady as ice as I continued. I appreciate all of the insults you have ever directed at me while you assumed I wasn't paying attention. I appreciate you making fun of my dreams. I appreciate you placing bets against me, having doubts about me, and demonstrating unequivocally that your definition of family was limited to your personal comfort. James stirred uneasily. No one dared to interrupt Jenna as she appeared to be about to say something. I leaned in a little and took a breath. You taught me something valuable. You taught me that real family isn't blood. It's loyalty. It's respect. It's standing beside someone when there's nothing to gain. A rhythm. And because of that lesson, today is not just a celebration of what I built, it's a farewell. They were slapped across the face by the words. I'm cutting ties, I remarked in a low voice. After today, I will no longer be part of this family. Quiet. Complete and utter quiet. Then the roar burst forth like a dam bursting. But we're family, exclaimed Aunt Linda. Jenna stumbled. You can't be serious. James moved forward with a somewhat terrified expression. Hey man, come on. Don't be dramatic. Even my normally calm mother appeared to have taken a hit to the gut. She opened and closed her mouth, but no sound emerged. I simply grinned, genuinely this time. Free. When I said, I wish you the best. And I hope someday you realize what you lost. I turned after that. I then turned to go. I didn't turn around. I could hear the frantic cries behind me, the begging voices becoming softer with each stride. Wait, please, don't do this. We didn't mean it. You're making a mistake. I continued to walk. Beyond the marble flooring, beyond the chandeliers that gleam, past everything that meant nothing at all and once harmed me. I arrived at the front door. Stopped. Then I shut it behind me without thinking twice. Like the last ending of a chapter, the hefty thud reverberated throughout the house, not only of that particular day but also of my previous existence. The environment outside felt different as the door snapped shut behind me. My face was stroked by the cool breeze. The driveway was bathed in a gentle golden glow as the sun began to set. There was silence. Calm. For a moment, I just stood there and took it in. Not a sound. Not guilty. Don't second-guess yourself. My former existence was behind those walls. The days of begging for bits of affection and pursuing praise were finally, totally ended. And while I stood there beneath the open sky, I came to the following realization: the quiet wasn't meaningless. It was liberty. There was nothing that I owed them. No justifications. I'm not sorry. No pardon. They had already made their decisions. Finally, I had done the same. I wasn't escaping them for the first time in my life. I had no intention of proving anything. I just kept on going, without them. Months have passed since that day. And what do you know? I've never regretted it. The phone calls. The written word. After a while, they ceased. Initially, the messages were hostile. Then guilt trips. Then frantic excuses. None of them were answered by me,